Okay, it's going.
My name is Josie Pelt. My counterpart is Jared Smith, and we did a report on the Jean Lafitte National Park and Preserve. The National Park and Preserve is made up of three significant sites: the Barataria Preserve, the Chalmelette Battlefield and National Cemetery, and the French Quarter Visitor Center. The Barataria Preserve was founded originally by French explorers in 1719. By 1730, early colonists were using the land for logging and lumber supply through their shipbuilding needs. The name Barataria first appeared in French maps, meaning dishonest at sea. This area was popularly used by smugglers and pirates. In 1808, Jean Lafitte and his brothers set up headquarters on the island Grand-Tier, located just south of the now preserve, using the natural resources to aid illegal trade with local plantation owners and others. Now the Barataria Preserve is home to 2,300 acres, including bayous, swamps, marshes, and forests. You can hunt at the Barataria Preserve, but only by permit. Canoeing, hiking is also available at the preserve. There is a link included for a current hunting brochure for any questions on that. The preserve also offers educational opportunities, including a junior ranger program, teaching the national and environmental importance of the Mississippi Delta region. And then right here we do have the opening pamphlet of the Junior Ranger book. You fill this out and you can earn a badge from the Barataria Preserve as a junior ranger. The Chalmelette Battlefield and National Cemetery, starting with the battlefield, was home to the infamous Battle of New Orleans. In 1815, Andrew Jackson enlisted the help of Jean Lafitte and his men to win the last great battle in the War of 1812. In return, Jean and his men were given pardons for their crimes of smuggling and pirating. Right here is a map of the actual battlefield lines. Jean Lafitte was very much involved, and so were his men. They were very expert at fighting, but they also had a lot of resources as well. The Chalmelette National Cemetery, which is not too far away as well, is a final home for war veterans from major wars ranging from the Battle of New Orleans all the way to the Vietnam War. It was established by President Abraham Lincoln to honor the Union soldiers originally, the ones that bravely fought along the Mississippi River during the Civil War. The French Quarter, it was rumored that Jean Lafitte had a blacksmith shop in the French Quarter. It still stands there today as well. It is easily one of the oldest buildings, but it has never been confirmed. They believe that it was a cover for his illegal activities. Established by the French in 1719, the city's access to waterways made shipping and trading easier for early colonists. Also called the Vieux Carré, excuse me if I said that absolutely wrong, meaning Old Square, the French Quarter has been influenced by many cultures that settled in surrounding areas. As early as the 1890s, the French Quarter has been a site for tourism. Steamboats would pour into the city, trading and shipping hot commodities of the time. The quarter has been rebuilt of several occasions due to fires and decaying buildings, hurricanes, other natural disasters. Now there stands the Jean Lafitte French Quarter Visitor Center. There you can join a park ranger on historic tours or visit the many historical units in the French Quarter. Learn about all of the African influences that have molded the southern Louisiana culture, as well as its community's part in the civil rights movement. They also do live music in the park, and it is common occurrence at the French Quarter especially. You can experience the sounds of jazz and other influential music that were born in the bayous of Louisiana. So, who is Jean Lafitte and why was he important? Well, Jean Lafitte, his history is mostly a mystery, but what we do know is that he and his brothers came to Louisiana in 1808, settling on the island Grand-Tier again, just south of the Barataria Preserve. Though Jean would prefer to be called a privateer, he was infamously known as a pirate and one of the best smugglers in Louisiana. Jean and his men, known as the Baratarians, used the Barataria to smuggle in slaves to southern plantation owners. International slave trade was illegal at this time, making Jean and his men wanted all over Louisiana for their crimes. So Jean Lafitte is connected to all the sites at the park and preserve, which is a big reason why it is named after him, but mostly what he did in the smuggling of the Barataria Preserve. Jean Lafitte and his men were elusive to the authorities. They used natural resources in the Barataria to hide, stockpile supplies, and even ambush unsuspecting traders. This made Jean and his men's high-priority fugitives, but as the War of 1812 started, more focus went on to war efforts. Jean and his men had an effective control over the Barataria, and Andrew Jackson knew that without their support, defeat by the British was a great possibility. Jackson offered Lafitte and his men pardons for their crimes if they aided in the Battle of New Orleans, leading to a great victory. Lafitte and his men held up their side of the deal and were granted pardons as well. His men were known as the Baratarians, and they settled in the Barataria Preserve now. There were also a lot of Acadian settlements there, leading into the Cajun culture, which we'll cover shortly. And so the Chalmette battlefield. When Britain declared war on America in 1812, most of the fighting was taking place on the east and northern coasts. British military had reached out to Jean in 1814 asking for help in an attack through the Gulf of Mexico. Instead, Jean decided to warn the American officials, though he was not believed at first. In fact, General Andrew Jackson had planned and executed an attack on the island Grantier where Lafitte's headquarters stood. However, General Jackson could not ignore the resources Lafitte had, leading to his decision to offer pardons and trade for their services in the Battle of New Orleans. The battlefield was later named after the nearby Chalmette plantation, and a partial monument was built commemorating the victory. In these memoirs located right back here, you can see that Andrew Jackson wrote about Lafitte and his men and their involvement in the Battle of New Orleans. The French Quarter, while it cannot be confirmed, Lafitte was rumored to have a blacksmith shop there located, as mentioned before, right there. The shop served as a front for his illegal business with local plantation owners. Jean was also known to roam the streets of the French Quarter with his men during nights, drinking and planning their next adventure. Another important part of the park is the Cajun history and the Acadians who were there. In this video I have, you can click on it, we'll have the Cajun music, some Bayou inspired. The Acadians came from Canada originally. In the early 17th century, French colonists that settled in parts of eastern Quebec, Canada. During the French and Indian War, Britain felt that the Acadians were not loyal to the empire and exiled them from Canada. Many of the Acadians were recruited by the Spanish government and moved to southern Louisiana, later developing the Cajun culture. Right here is an original map of the Acadian settlements in the eastern Quebec area of Canada before they were exiled in 1755. The park has now had 3 units added to it in 1979 to display and honor the Acadian culture. You have the Acadian Culture Center, the Prairie Acadian Culture Center, and the Wetlands Acadian Culture Center. The main one, the Acadian Culture Center, tells stories of origins, migration, settlement, and contemporary culture of the Cajuns and other groups in the area. The Prairie Center discovers the life of Louisiana's Prairie Cajuns through ranger programs, exhibits, artifacts, and films. The Wetlands, last but not least, shares the lives of Cajuns and others whose travels brought them to Louisiana bayous, featuring recreation, clothing, home furnishing, religion, cuisine, and fishing through exhibits, artifacts, videos, and films. So why do I care about the importance of Jean Lafitte National Park and Preserve? And why should you? Well, there are diverse reasons the government would think it is important to make a national park here. Firstly, the location in relation to the French Quarter, which is a key aspect of the history of a large American city. Secondly, the Battle of New Orleans, a historic American victory. Thirdly, the National Cemetery had already began to take shape after the Civil War when many veterans were buried there. Lastly, because of the diverse ecosystem, it's prime land for nature preservation. The significance of the French Quarter holds culture and economic importance to American history. Being a hotspot for trading and commercial markets, the Quarter has always been populated by many cultures. The Quarter has been rebuilt numerous times, and every rebuild has brought more culture and character to the city. The significance of the Chalmette battlefield and the Battle of New Orleans was known as the last great battle of the war of 1812. The Battle of New Orleans propelled Andrew Jackson as a war hero, and the resounding American victory at the Battle of New Orleans soon became the symbol of a new idea: American democracy triumphing over old European ideas of aristocracy and entitlement. Though this was believed to be the end of the War of 1812, it was actually the signing of the Treaty of Ghent in 1814, but unfortunately, because of all the bureaucracy and slow communication, it was still believed that the Battle of New Orleans was actually what won the war. And the significance of the Chalmette National Cemetery: it was established in May of 1864, and it was a final resting place for the Union soldiers who had died in Louisiana during the Civil War. Chalmette National Cemetery's more than 14,000 headstones mark the grave sites of veterans of the Spanish-American War, World Wars and I and II, and the Vietnam War. 4 Americans who fought in the War of 1812 were buried there as well, but it was not an established cemetery, though only one of them took part in the Battle of New Orleans. This national cemetery has been a resting place for almost every American war and is a final home to many brave soldiers. The significance of the Barataria Preserve is more environmental. It's home to hundreds of different animals and plant life at risk of losing habitat. Wetlands have started to disappear all over Louisiana, making the preserve a highly important place. Without protection, it is likely these animals will face losing their habitat and plant life dying out. All right. The economic aspects and significance of the park is closely tied to the economic significance of New Orleans due to its geographic location on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico and the incredible level of diversity there. International trade was a cinch for the people of New Orleans. After its inception, New Orleans quickly became a hub for maritime industry, and to this day operates as one of the busiest ports in the world. The ports began to bustle in the antebellum era and the Atlantic slave trade. Despite this, New Orleans have had one of the highest and wealthiest populations of free-colored persons in the nation. Today, New Orleans ports account for a significant proportion of the nation's petroleum business in both shipping and administratively. Thank you so much for watching my presentation.
That was fantastic.